one thing farms have to remember, people are leaving the corporate world or leaving large organizations and specifically looking to target small to medium-sized companies. So we hear this a lot as recruiters, that they're just done with the larger organization. They're looking for a smaller company. So that is an advantage. We need to be bragging about that, obviously, that point, right? That they've got to stay on the farm and we're a family-owned business, that family feel. So that would be one way.
Ladies and gentlemen, farmers, ranchers, and distinguished guests, thank you for listening to the Farm4Profit podcast, where we discuss the latest ideas, methods, trends, and techniques available to help your farm achieve higher levels of farm profitability. The Farm4Profit podcast is co-hosted by Tanner Winterhoff, the Iowa Bankerman, and David Whitaker, the Iowa Land Guy, where in tandem they will share their ideas and advice from industry experts. Thank you again for listening to the Farm4Profit podcast. Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long. And now, here's Tanner and David.
Hey, listeners, thanks again for listening to the Farm4Profit podcast. This is Tanner Winterhoff.
And this is David Whitaker.
And again, thank you for reminding us that we, during these introductions, should remind you that I am an ag banker, and David?
I am the auctioneer realtor, sell land.
So give you a little bit of perspective on where we come from. This is going to be a Farm4Profit episode, so we'll have a What's Working in Ag segment and a general topic to help your farm achieve higher levels of profitability. Next week is a Farm for Fun show, where we talk to somebody related to agriculture, learn a little bit about them and what they've seen around the network that makes things move pretty successfully.
And Tanner, if any of our listeners have suggestions, make sure to go to our social media channels first, like, rate, review, and then also email us at farm4profitllc@gmail.com. Any suggestions you have?
Yeah, and here's a listener review as an example. Today's Head of the Class listener review is brought to you by Geringhoff. They're head of the class no matter the crop. They have the premium harvesting heads for all of your harvesting needs. Our listeners' reviews are exactly what we need to fuel our energy each week, and Geringhoff is exactly what you need to maximize your harvest every fall. What a cool partner, Dave.
So, Tanner, the review this week was at Minnesota.
Did it really have that many O's in it?
It had about 7 O's in there, I think. Fun and informative podcast, left on Apple Podcast with a 5-star. Thank you for that review. We sure appreciate that.
We love the 5-star reviews. And Dave, today in our What's Working in Ag segment, we are blessed with a guest here in studio for a change, John Schront with Geringhoff. He's a territory manager for the company. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Awesome. We want to explore a little bit about yourself to begin with. So why don't you give us your elevator speech? What's your introduction?
Started out in farming, dairy farm, pretty far away from a grain farm crop operation, but got into the agriculture world through a row crop, I should say, through a dealer. Started out as a mechanic, worked my way into sales, did sales there for a few years, and had the opportunity to come to Geringhoff and work with them, and that's kind of where I am today.
So where was home as you were growing up? Was it in Iowa?
Yeah, northeast Iowa, just south of Decorah. Grew up on a family farm near Fort Atkinson.
That's a beautiful
dairy farm, probably up that direction.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place.
It's God's country, they say.
Well, I would argue differently, but it is very beautiful. I've only been up that way a couple of different times, and it seems like every single time I'm on the rumble strips a lot, gawking out the window.
Yeah, it's a good old Iowa rubbernecking.
Yeah. So now you're still tied with agriculture, work for Geringhoff, quite a company. Appreciate their sponsorship all the time. What a company. We've had a lot of good comments about them. What's your role at Geringhoff?
So I'm a territory manager, sales manager for Iowa and Missouri, like you said. And I work with the dealers that carry our products and help them with demos and the sales process, things like that.
Perfect. Well, John, since this is the first time in our studio with us, normally every week we do a What's Working in Ag. And What's Working Ag is coffee shop talk when we tell the local farmer, like, hey, what's working for you? What's working for you? So we're curious, with Geringhoff, we might hear you have an announcement. What's working with Geringhoff?
Well, here at Geringhoff, we're excited to announce our XDC roll. It's an extreme decomposition stock roll. And what that does works really well with strip till and no-till farmers. It's cutting your stock in 2.5 to 3.5 inch pieces. completely shearing it and cutting it. And then also with the leaves and other debris, it will cut, slice, and dice, but mainly somewhat leave that as a whole piece as well, so you still keep that material in your field. But it puts it right down on the stubble, keeps it above the stubble there, so it keeps your in between the rows cleaner for coming back in, and you get better seed to soil contact. Your soil warms up faster, obviously, with the bare dirt. So we've had some demos in the past 2 years, I believe, and those guys have been extremely happy with the performance of that.
This is just another thing that Geringhoff is releasing. So we got to talk to the president of your company, and he stated, the tagline we do every week in our listener review is they're head of the class no matter the crop, and you have a head for all harvesting needs. This just sounds like another tool in the tool belt.
Yeah, you look at the full line of the Geringhoff product. They've got the roto disc for your extreme chopping, and the bread and butter head, the North Star. This is added on to the North Star, so you've got the reliability, the durability of that North Star head with the added option of these XDC rolls, which is going to be a real game changer for a lot of guys.
So you don't have to buy an entirely new head. If you already have a Geringhoff head, you can upgrade it with this new.
That's a good point. Currently, it's going to be only available on new heads.
Boys, you're going to have to upgrade.
So it may be possible in the future. We don't know yet, but as of right now, that is the way it is.
And can we see this demoed anywhere? Is it any spot that farmers like to get their hands on the stuff? I know I do.
Yes, we will have it at the Farm Progress Show. That will kind of be, or that is our unveiling there. That's going to be where we'll have the head. I don't know if we'll be running in the field, depending on what the conditions are like there in Illinois, but it will be there to view and see up close.
And since that's the unveiling, I assume then each show thereafter that you're going to have traveling displays to where people will be able to see these up front, touch them, get to feel what they're actually going to do for their operation.
Yeah, and somewhat limited availability right now, being that it's going to be released out in 22, but there hopefully will be displays and for people to see at these shows. And finally, we're glad to get back into these shows after last year. We got kind of pulled out, and exciting to get back out there.
Yeah. So then one last question for you. You're relatively new with Geringhoff as a company. So what was your personal draw to Geringhoff?
So in the dealer that I'd worked for in the past, we were a Geringhoff dealer. Working with Geringhoff was always a pleasurable experience, whether it be a service issue, setting up, or having actually my first demo on their flex razors. It was the birth of my first child. So we were setting up the demo, and I had to go. And those guys got Lon Jordan came over, and they ran the demo for me, and obviously ended in a sale. But that's the kind of the mentality, and that's the people that work for Geringhoff, and that's really what brought me to and want to work for Geringhoff.
Well, we appreciate Geringhoff's continued support of the podcast. We also appreciate you spending some time with us. This is exciting that we get to share some of the unveiling news that you guys have to offer with your product advancement. So these extreme decomposition rolls, or the XDC stock rolls, are going to be a new option available to our listeners. So if they want to get in contact with you specifically, how do they do that?
My phone number is 641-790-0002. And, if you got any, our local dealers should be able to answer some questions. And if you got more in-depth stuff, I'd be more than happy to come out and meet with you or answer those phones over the phone. Answer those questions over the phone. Yeah,
and you're happy to reach out to Farm4Profit. We've got connections to a lot of different people inside of Geringhoff. You can go to Geringhoff.com. Remember that they are German engineering combined with American muscle. They've been manufacturing the industry's leading harvest equipment since 1880. They strive to create and deliver the ultimate harvest experience, making harvesting easier, more reliable, and with the ultimate performance for your farm. So it's really cool. Again, thanks for the partnership from Geringhoff. It was great to meet you, John. Thanks for popping in here and sharing it with us. Listeners, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out and go that way.
Well, thanks for having me. You guys really have an awesome thing going here for you.
Thanks, John.
Definitely. So we did our What's Working in Ag with Geringhoff. Geringhoff, thank you for participating in What's Working in Ag. Tanner, what's our main topic today?
Yeah, so on to our main topic, and we are, again, taking one of these listener suggestions, and it's not just one of you listeners. We have had this idea brought to our attention by, I'm going to say dozens, because I don't think we quite have 50 or so, but I'm going to say dozens of you are struggling to find and keep good help on your farm. So that's what we're going to focus on today, Dave. We've got an expert in the house, Lori Kohler. She's the founder and owner of AgHires. She grew up in and around the agriculture industry on her family's third-generation potato, tomato, and grain operation in southeast Michigan and northern Indiana. The number one thing that she hears from her clients and prospects is that they struggle to find good help. It's the holy grail for a farm to have and to keep around the good help. She's here today to do exactly what she helps her clients with for you to listen today, see if we can't have any success in finding you your next best worker.
You bet.
Welcome, Lori.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This, I don't think, could be any more timely. Maybe we should have done it 2 weeks earlier.
We should have.
But the way calendars fall and the way we're getting ready to roll into harvest, Lori, I don't think there's a better time than now to make sure that our farms have the adequate and best help that we can get.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're coming at a time where season's busy, typically we're short, kind of scrubbing it through harvest. And, to hit it off, we're at a time right now that I haven't seen a time like this in my entire 20 plus years of recruiting, with how great the shortage is. We've talked about the war for talent and the shortage of all-stars, for probably several years now, right? But this past year in particular, we're up against, some even more, difficult circumstances. I know our local Wendy's is offering up to $22 per hour.
Oh, mercy.
McDonald's is offering $16. And so we're at a point where our operators on our farm, our mechanics, those key players, have a lot of opportunities, right around that same pay range and kind of pushing up our pay range. So we have some unique challenges right now.
So we kind of alluded to the fact that it's harvest season and that farmers might need harvest help, but is that all AgHires does, or do you find higher placing jobs as well? Tell me a little bit more about AgHires.
Yep. So AgHires, we recruit across the entire U.S. and Canada. So we have our job board side of our business where employers post jobs in agriculture. We have several services in between. We'll talk about that during the podcast, where we're helping them with social media advertising, casting onto several job boards. And then we also have a service where we're sourcing passive candidates for that farm. And then all the way up to full service recruiting. So our full service recruiting would be roles such as farm managers, general managers, could be on the ag retail side, could be on the sales agronomy side, all the way to like food processing. Really, we support the full supply chain of agriculture.
Nice. So then if we're going to attack a listener that you haven't spoken to before and we're going to get this kicked off, where would you even start with a new connection?
So when a client calls us for the first time, we're usually trying to figure out, what are you looking for? Who is this person? Where's the gap on the farm? What we often see is when I say, hey, walk me through what we're trying to hire here, right? It's interesting to me that they often list, I need someone that thinks 10 steps ahead. I need someone that's a listener. I need someone that's a problem solver. Maybe their farm's growing, so we hear a lot about leadership. We want more leadership on our farm. You didn't hear that really 5-10 years ago. We need that developed. What's interesting to me is the ag background actually comes like last. They need all these qualities, and they say, well, I really need them to have agriculture, background, which on our own farm, again, we prefer, right? Ag's always a great background. But with this shortage, we just listed off a ton of qualities that can come from both agriculture and outside of agriculture. So when a client comes to us, we are kind of pushing, especially in today's market, for, depending on the role, is ag a must-have? Could we pull someone from construction or a military that maybe did like heavy wheeled mechanics, on that side of things, or heavy equipment on the construction side, or something that's relatable. Kind of historically, we've always said, hey, we need someone from a farm background, and we want someone that grew up on a farm. That pulls less and less. So where can we pull from? So when we start with a client, it's really, what is this role you need? And then, take a step back further is, where are you heading as an organization? Is your farm growing? what is the future need, for your farm, and not just think about this opening, but what might you need in a year, 2 years, or 3 years, because the training time takes a while. You think about, you get one crop a year. So you have one opportunity to train on planting or one opportunity to see harvest. And there's only so many, right? And it takes a whole year to see that whole cycle through. So if you're thinking about where you want to head 3 years from now, what you need, we have to be thinking that far ahead, right? I would say historically, we've kind of said, what do we need for this season? So that change in dynamics has to happen.
There was a lot in that opening comment, and I appreciate that. It brought back a couple of different things. I'm going to pick apart. So we actually have a consultant that comes into the bank that helps managers build their skills as a manager. So you might not have had management experience in the past, but with this consultant, that's a way for her to come in and help us step up and learn ways that we might be more effective. And her husband farms, and she mentioned the same thing. She went through a consultation with him about how they were going to replace one of their key employees. And the last thing that came out of his mouth was that ag experience or equipment experience. He goes, I can teach him to run the tractor. I can teach him to feed cows. But what I need the dependable. I need the leadership. I need all these other intangibles that are much more necessary. We can train than the rest. So it reminds me of what my HR team says is hire for the qualities and train on the skills. And then secondly, that I wanted to kind of where you're headed is, I think it's important for the farm to understand what the goals are. What direction are you headed? Are we winding down? Are we growing? Are we looking to stay the same? Are we going to expand into another style of farming business? Because those goals are going to be really key, Dave.
I think so. I think they'll be very important depending on what you're looking for. So when they call you, Lori, to get something, when I thought of AgHires before, I thought of students coming out of college that had a degree looking to get placed is what I was thinking. You're coming at it from the person who needs to hire more often than not, and they're going to come your way, and then you're going to find the key candidate for them. Am I hearing that right?
Exactly. Correct. We do work obviously with individuals coming out of college, but really it's the employers that call us to say, solve this problem. Again, whether it be an agronomist, whether it be a farm manager, again, ag retail, other aspects of ag machinery, ag equipment side, but they're coming to us as an employer and saying, I have this need, there's a shortage, I can't fill it. Use your expertise in filling it. And what we see is typically the pool isn't big enough, or the farm, let's say, well, I know we have a strong farm audience, so I'll try to kind of keep it honed in a little bit extra on the farm. The challenge is that they might be looking at a pool of one or two on their own, or none. That could be none. But, or, hey, I got this neighbor that gave me a referral. But you can't be selective off of a pool of 0, 1, or 2. So what we need to do is get them a larger pool of candidates to look at that have been pre-vetted, that we feel are strong candidates in front of them. And today's market, I know why they're struggling. Again, we do this for a living as recruiters. It takes us about twice the amount of reach outs to passive candidates to get one hire as it did 3 years ago.
Wow.
So even though I do this for a living, it takes out double the effort to get your typical hire versus just a couple years ago. And so I realize the farmers are feeling this, and it's for a reason. That the shortage is a lot stronger than it was, several years back. So,
right.
So how far back does you said 3 years, I heard. Like if I know that one of my employees is going to quit, or they've told me they're going to move on, or it's a grandpa on the farm, let's say Tanner, that we just know as a family he's probably not going to make it, but he did serve a role, or he or she, or somebody got a job in town. How far back should they start planning with you to get this? Like, how long does that process take? You said it took twice as much effort. How long does it take?
So typically, when we're hiring, we're really typically filling within 30 to 40 days typically for our placements. When it comes to a farm that's planning, it's much better to plan much further out.
Oh, right.
Especially when it comes to transition. Individuals we know that are, key leaders in the organization, are just like my father, just has just a ton of knowledge over the years to share. It's always better to start that process a year or two in advance. But we typically see hey, we're planning ahead for the transition at 6 months out.
Okay.
And so by the time we do our hiring, someone gets on board, they've given their 2-week notice. Right now we're 2 months in, and then you're only having a couple months of transition time. It's really not enough. So I would say, one suggestion is always planning further ahead, knowing what that need is. And you're not always going to know that, especially if someone obviously leaves, and unexpectedly. That has to be filled right away without that pre-planning. But if you can, we're still seeing people kind of wait too far to the end to make that transition.
So that brings up a question of mine. I've got a couple of customers that when they do have a vacancy, always seems like when I ask for a description of what they're doing, they described what the person was doing that just left. How should we be looking at forming these job descriptions or roles? Should we even care about what the person that just quit or left or the hole that we're trying to fill, or how much should that play into things?
Right. That's a great question. I typically, when someone leaves, it's actually your opportunity, especially on a farm, if you got a smaller team, it's your opportunity to say, all right, who is great at what? And am I going to shift some individuals around? And again, what do I need for the future? And this might be your opportunity to hire someone with that leadership skills or that management ability that maybe the prior person didn't bring to the table, or someone that's really focused on efficiency. We love to hire engineers into ag, that whole continuous improvement mindset, that they bring to the table in terms of developing process and always looking for lean practices. So what does your farm need? And then where would that come from? So I would agree with you, looking at the current incumbent that is walking out the door, just looking at what they did, that would really just limit you for your expanding and growing your farm.
In the banking world, Dave, we do exit interviews. Mm-hmm. So we also get perspective from the person that quit or is leaving as to, in their role, what was working well and what wasn't. Because maybe you don't understand what was causing their frustrations, and why put someone right back into a spot that's going to frustrate them also.
You brought something up that drew my eye to take a step back and think for a second, and that was maybe somebody transitions or moves in that farming operation. Like, I always wanted to be the grain cart operator, but doggone it, I didn't get to. I was just driving you probably should ask the other people in your organization before you actually go to hire this, because maybe you're filling the wrong position. Maybe they want to move into that position, and then maybe you move out. I never thought about having the conversation with your current employees of, hey, do you want to move into that position? Or hey, we have this opening. Is anybody else interested?
That's not a bad idea.
Right. You talk about exit interviews. They're called stay interviews. You can call them whatever you want, but it would be very similar to what David's talking about, where you actually don't wait for someone to leave. And it's not necessarily a performance interview. It's really your opportunity to sit down with each employee and say, hey, what's going well here? What do you like about working here? And what can we do to help you grow? Where can we improve? So we look at attracting people. One of the number one questions candidates ask me is, what is it like to work there? So when I ask my clients, hey, what's your work culture like? How do we describe it to someone? Typically it's, deer in headlights a little bit of, right. Well, I don't know how to describe our culture. So that would be a great way to gather information from your current team. And then, hey, what can we do to improve upon that? Because again, attracting people to your operation versus another company is the name of the game. So how do we use those stay interviews or those discussions basically to gather that information and improve?
Tanner, I'm guessing if we gather
stay interviews, I like that.
If you want me to stay, I need more money. That's what's going to be on my interview. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah,
that's a good point. So we create a position. How do we determine how much we pay? So if they do ask for more, we can say, no, that's too much, or yes, you deserve it. How do you go about establishing what a position's worth?
Yeah, so that's a challenge right now. So typically you do two things. You look at your budget, what can you afford, and what is the going rate for the market, and kind of balancing. With this shortage, I often say, if you want someone with experience ready to go, you're going to have to pay more, a lot more than you were before. Or we have to maybe take someone and train them. That's kind of like your options, your cards that are on the table right now with this shortage. So
let's go off the rails for just a second.
Oh, okay.
Why is there a shortage? What is causing this? Why we have to pay more? We can't find anybody. I mean, there was a pandemic. You think people would want to go back to work, jobs, etc. Is there something else that I'm missing?
So the shortage has been going on for a while. So it's, I would say, again, I've been doing these talks, like DTM Progressive Farmer, that it's been going on for a while, especially for what I call top talent. So there are employees, there are candidates, but if you were going to grow your farm, and we know talent drives performance, it really kind of drives the bottom line. We only want that top 10% of all stars.
Okay.
And, really, that's what I talk to my clients. We want, and there's only so many of those to go around. So I would say that's always kind of been the crux, right? There's only so many all stars that are really going to drive performance. The pandemic has just kind of, especially for the operators and tech level, I would say, has fueled it because of the incentives, right, that individuals were getting. And so employers are hiring, they can't find anyone. I don't know about your area. So I'm calling you from Michigan here. And in our area, everyone's hiring, everyone's short, and that pay keeps increasing. So your line operators, I was just searching before this call just to make sure I had accurate information, but your production line assembly operators, about 22, warehouse 22. So we're up against, those types of roles that pay time and a half, have a structured schedule, against our operator role, or our, tech role. So we've been short on the all-stars, but the pandemic and the shortage of staff right now, specifically this year, has caused a greater issue. So your kind of farm operator that might have been maybe like $16 to $18 an hour, now is in the 20s. And I don't want to scare anyone. Maybe we don't want to put this on, David, but there is several like 25 to 28, that we interviewed, great candidates. This is like $10 an hour more than it was 8 years ago. Right. So for the same role. So that's what we're kind of up against. But the pandemic kind of added to it, especially again, more at those, I would say, entry and skilled labor level roles.
So Tanner, we want the upper echelon of everybody, but it goes right back to pay. So let me get us back on our tracks again. So we're going with pay, and how do we as the farm operator determine what that pay should be? It sounds like we just have to give more to get the good talent, but maybe
or be okay knowing what it's going to take to manage lesser talent
or train them.
Right.
Yep,
that's
or
true.
Train. Right. Yeah.
And I have heard this comment, well, I can't pay my guys more than what I make as the farm owner.
This is a challenge. This is honestly a challenge I've had with several of my clients the last couple of months. It's been coming up a lot. So let's say they're like, okay, I realize, Lori, the market's changing rapidly and I do need to increase. But they're looking at, let's say they're a mid-size or larger farm, they're looking at their team. And so do I need to increase everyone across my entire organization? Now that's really going to cost me,
right? Yep.
Some serious dollars. There's a dealership, I won't use their name. They've done 2 pay increases across their service techs in the past about 18 months across the whole board, just to retain. So what we're seeing, and again, I don't know if I have the solution. I would love to say I have the solution on this one. But it is a challenge, even if you're saying, yes, let me pay more to attract that person. Okay, now what do I do with the rest of my staff? Am I going to raise everyone up? The question I get asked is it going to go back down? I don't know. I don't believe that to be the case. Now that the bar's been raised, does it really pull back? And we're kind of in unprecedented times. I don't know if I see that pulling back.
Yeah, we've got 3 car dealerships in Ames. And when I took my pickup in to get serviced, that's what they were saying is the service techs are basically just bouncing between all 3 of these local dealerships based upon the other incentives that are sign-on bonuses, but you got to hang on for 90 days and whatever other structures there are. So maybe that's where we could go.
That's what I was just thinking. Is there something like, okay, I can't pay them any more money, but maybe we give them something extra, some vested interest, some equity shares, some half a hog or some food or some, you got ideas there?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things. One, we talked about that culture. But there are like extra benefits you can do. I don't think they're as costly maybe as individuals think. So I kind of want to walk through some of that because again, if we're attracting them for the long haul, we've got to walk through that. But one thing farms have to remember, people are leaving the corporate world or leaving large organizations and specifically looking to target small to medium-sized companies. So we hear this a lot as recruiters, that they're just done with the larger organization. They're looking for a smaller company. Again, 10 years ago, the opposite, right? They want to go with a larger company, lots of room to move up. So that is an advantage. We need to be bragging about that, obviously, that point, right? That they've got to stay on the farm and we're a family-owned business, that family feel. So that would be one way. But the other things are obviously, the extras like side of beef, right? Vacation time, things like that.
Pickup truck.
Health insurance. Health insurance is a touchy subject. It's expensive. So you have I just was looking to make sure I have my facts. So about 50% of businesses like with 3 to 9 employees offer health insurance. So you're up against a little bit of that. And then 70% for that 10, I believe the 20 employee range roughly. And so health insurance costs about $5,500 for a single individual. And so if your farm employee works about 2,500 hours on average, that's about $2 an hour for that cost. So, and maybe you share that cost. So I think we often think health insurance can't be obtainable. I think it could be, or some sort of like help towards that health insurance. Again, the market already moved up well more than $2. So if that's what it takes. Other things are like simple IRAs are very reasonable. Again, similar to a 401k, very cheap, I would say, to implement maybe, but it's like $25 or $30 per employee. It's relatively simple to set up a simple IRA. So you can talk about, hey, we've got a 401k planned and we've got vacation time and we have these extra perks. And maybe you don't have health insurance, but we'll pay an extra $1 per hour towards your health insurance. I think that's a much better package than, we can't compete, but I think you can. We just have to craft a few of these, benefits that in the end scheme are not the largest portion of their employee cost, but they are very attractive to employees.
I like the terminology sticky. You do that and you're paying for their cell phone monthly, or they're on a joint farm plan or whichever. That makes it harder for an employee to leave because all of a sudden, crap, when I quit, I now have to go buy a new phone, set up my plan, get everything wrapped back in. So some of these little things can be sticky items that are an extra incentive to keep employees around.
We could talk about bonuses. Bonuses are, probably a whole nother podcast to talk about bonuses. Because, if we don't have the structure set up for why you got the bonus, I say they're dangerous. If you give a bonus one year, why did we get it? We're going to expect it next year. So if you're going to do the bonus route, I'm a big fan of it. But as long as it's structured and it has, tied to, yield or something. Now people can say, well, we don't, always predict the yield, right? I mean, there's a lot of weather and other things. But you can still structure it as the team does X and the farm produces X, there is a percentage bonus so that it doesn't necessarily hurt the farm on a rougher year. Then really we all kind of didn't get as much on the bonus with that. So there again are ways to incentivize, but have it align with those years that your farm is doing and performing better financially.
Which I think that makes sense because if it is truly a team effort helping the farm make more money, then you can share reward with those employees.
Right. We want them to think about efficiency. I think getting their mindset around what drives the bottom line, sharing that data, having them all contribute, makes them think about if they missed that row or they need to go back and do this, or why would I make 2 trips? If they're constantly thinking about kind of like the cost and benefit to their actions throughout the day, it will really end up in increasing that bottom line. And then could that be tied to some type of incentive? Yeah,
giving a little bit of ownership almost, Dave.
Yeah, I'm reeling back 10 minutes ago, and I'm trying to think. You said that they want, most employers want somebody with an ag background. What is an ag background is what I was thinking. So is it, do I have to have a degree and I've never worked on a farm, or is it I've worked on a farm and I don't have a degree? What's your thoughts there? I get kids, younger folks all the time, since we live at where Iowa State University is. that talked with a gal this morning. She's an animal science major, and my wife recommended to her that she goes for ag studies and or an ag business background because it's more generic. She could get hired more places than just animal science.
That's true. I would say, and I feel like I'm speaking a lot here on the farms, but I would say on the farm side, they're typically looking that they grew up on a farm, worked on a farm,
Okay.
Had that experience. I would say on a farm, they care less typically about the degree. And then opposite, I would say on our ag businesses or agribusinesses, a little bit more on the degree, but they do look to see if they've been on a farm or grew up on a farm.
Sure.
But I look at, I look again, and some of the all-stars we have at our clients or prior even individuals they've hired, and you learn about their backgrounds that they have no agriculture. So, I think it's dangerous to kind of pigeonhole you to that pool of candidates.
Gotcha.
Again, great pool, but maybe not hold yourself just to that pool.
So then we need to talk about advertising for both sides. So advertising to get hired as a college student or a new worker, advertising as the farm to try to find that candidate.
How do we find them? Right.
How do we find them? So now we know what we're looking for. How do we find them?
You got any tips?
Sure. Of course, AgHires, right? That's what I'm going to say first, right? Come see us in terms of that. On the employer side, so I'll play with that. On the employer side, it's really, step one is coming up with the right job description or job posting. And most of our clients need a significant amount of work on that aspect. So, a few things, I won't bore you with all the details, but making sure you've got a little bit about the company and who you are and what kind of operation you have and size and scope. And then they're either too long or too short. So they're extremely detailed and you walk away still not knowing what the job is.
Yeah.
Or it's super loose and you still don't know what the job is.
Don't know what the job. Yep.
I always say it's got to have one or two sentences in there. If you were on the elevator with somebody and I said, hey, I'm hiring, great, what kind of job are you hiring for? Whatever comes out of your mouth for that 1 to 2 sentences, that needs to be just right in the posting. What is that? What does this job do in a nutshell? And that should be on there. And then you can have your details. And then last thing on the posting is really not to have your requirements too stringent. And candidates really do look at that. So if you say that you tell me you're open on backgrounds, but your job posting says I only want agriculture backgrounds, most strong candidates won't apply if they don't have it. So I think qualifications, you have to be a little careful on, again, how firm those are. And the job posting is great. We have huge traffic on AgHires site every single day. And I'm here to tell you that's still not enough, just with a posting, right? And we have a job board that's very prominent. But again, name of the game is it's short. So we like to couple that with social media. We have a paid social media advertising where we're targeting those ads to go in front of people within a certain mile radius of that area. So maybe they see it, maybe their wife sees it, their mom sees it, someone's on social media and sees that job and says, oh, hey, guess what? This job's open. And then also passive candidate recruiting. That is where, we're going out and reaching out to passive candidates that don't have a resume out there. They're probably not on a job board, not even on our job board. They're probably not on any job board. And, we're reaching out to those candidates. So when I talk to employers, again, we can help a lot. We can help a little, depending on their needs. But what we need to do is a lot more than just one advertising. Because, that doesn't work. Word of mouth, of course, that's used to be the main way, and that's kind of going away. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend newspapers. Using their own network, like on LinkedIn and things like that, posting out to your own network that you're hiring, getting out there is a good way. On the flip side, so for candidates, we're actually going to be talking to Purdue students here soon, and next week. And so we want them to market themselves, right? So as you're looking for your career planning, how do you market your background? How do you market, kind of who you are as a person, and use your connections to make sure that it's known that you're looking and what you're looking for. So a good way to start is like on LinkedIn, kind of having a profile and start connecting with people within your industry and introducing yourself. For that's probably a whole nother podcast just for students, is really career planning and career pathing, and really thinking about where you're heading, and strategically thinking about internships and shadowing experience to help you get there faster.
You just made me think of a couple of one, a cliche, and then a couple of examples for the candidates looking to advertise themselves. It comes back to, in my opinion, it's not what you know, it's who you know. The what helps, but if you can make a lot of connections, that's going to probably provide you with a lot more opportunities, or someone who can stand behind those skills, the what you know part of it, to really help you get started. But when you were talking about where do we advertise, I did have a client of mine that I think said it really well, is think about where the ideal worker is right now. So if you're wanting to get somebody who's a drunkard and knows everybody in town, advertise at the bar.
Yep.
If you're wanting to get someone that has that college degree, well, you should be on the university job boards. If you want someone who
construction background,
correct,
mechanic, yeah,
look at those fields, and then that rolls right into the passive. I can't remember exactly how you said that. The passive recruiting is what you said.
Yeah.
And that's something that I do in the banking world. So I look all the time for great customer service for our teller line, because that's a tough position to keep a long time in the banking world, because when you have a good teller, they get promoted. And then there's a vacancy there again. If you don't have a good teller, they get let go and you try to fill the same spot. So I'm looking everywhere. And there was a time I went into a restaurant and had the best customer service from a waitress. I gave her my card. I said she needed to apply. We ended up hiring her right away. And she's been one of the best tellers we've ever had, moved to personal banker, moved up into a branch manager role. So that's the passive recruiting that works quite well. If you do go to church and you see the kid that's always weeding the flower beds, or you do go to the Van Wall, or I shouldn't say no free ads.
Free ads.
Go to the dealership, and one of the mechanics is always helping you out, or the parts guys. Yeah, keep your eyes out, because you never know. They may be looking to do something different themselves.
One thing I thought of is you said don't make your requirements too strict. I've applied for a job, and I was hesitant to apply for the job because I didn't have a 4-year degree, but it said you needed a 4-year degree. And I told the guy who kind of referred me to the position, I'm like, well, I don't even have the qualifications. He's like, you got the qualifications, just apply. Well, lo and behold, I get hired. So do you recommend to students to out hit their coverage there, or outplay their coverage?
That's a good question.
Sure. Yeah. I think that happens quite a bit. Again, if we're with our clients working on a role, we'll try to help fix that. But, think of all the large organizations that post on our job board. A lot of times they're stricter than what they'll accept. Okay. So I would say for those college students to stretch a little bit. Again, it's a little bit to their advantage, right? The market is tight right now. So if you're going to be able to jump up a little sooner than maybe, when I was starting my career, now is the time, because I think they can stretch. So I would say yes.
Nice. So I know I keep having all these questions I want to say. We might end up having to have it on a second time, but let's jump ahead. We found a candidate. We found a pool of candidates that we're really excited about. How do we ask the right questions in an interview to make sure that we pick the best out of our pool?
That's a great question. So I'll go through some of my favorites. But before I do that, I want to go through the process. Okay. So I would say most farms and agribusinesses, they tend to interview like once, and they make a judgment call, right? And so that's kind of dangerous. We really want to talk at least twice in person, if not 3 times, because a lot more comes out in their personality and who they are the more time that you spend with them. So I realize that's asking for a lot of upfront time that farmers just love that I ask them to give. But the chances of you having a miss in terms of a hire is a lot less. So there's a lot of things that can happen on 2 and 3. So when it comes to screening, a lot of times I'm recommending they do spend time on their background, their skills. But I really want to get a lot deeper than that. So, what do they love to do? What do they not love to do? If you look at their past roles, why do they move from one position to another? What kind of drove that decision? What's it like working with them on a daily basis? How do people describe them? A lot of the times the questions I'm trying to dig at is who they are, goes back to those inherent traits we talked about. Who are they as a person? What drives them? And the reason you're going for that is you can meet someone's like, oh yeah, that's a great candidate, and oh yeah, they've got mechanics, oh yeah, they can do it all, and then you shove them in a truck and they look like they're unmotivated.
Right.
Well, they really just love to wrench. So if we would have really listened in on that or asked those questions, you would have found out I hate operating equipment. I mean, I'll do it, but I really just loved wrench, and I really love to work by myself. I'm pretty quiet. I don't, whatever the case might be. So I think you're needing to spend a lot more time with those decisions. Where were they looking to head with their career? Let's say they had a degree. Well, what were you looking to do with that degree, and kind of figure them out a little bit more than just their tasks, because that you can run through fairly quickly. But I think, you have to figure out who fits on your team. And then besides the list of interview questions, and I don't know if you have a place for us to share some of those, we could send a list for you if you want to share.
I can throw them in the show notes if you want.
Okay. So besides the interview questions is really observing them through their actions. So, don't just have them sit behind a desk, take them out to the field, take them out to walk the shop. I want to see them move, talk, walk. What kind of questions do they have? Definitely should be a little bit more in depth than people like to do. Because the more you get talk with them, the more you're going to understand, what it is about them and if they're a good fit. So that's kind of a high level overview, but I tend to see individuals not dig enough, right? Or, yeah, I left that job. Manager was really strict. Okay, well, what was that? What does strict mean to you? And have them go further. So if I had one tip of all this, it would just be keep digging a little bit in those conversations, have it be friendly. But at the same time, we really kind of need to get to those answers to figure out who they are.
So you just sparked a thought in my mind about what could also be beneficial of these extra meetings. That gal that I told you that is a consultant for the bank also tells us that this is our opportunity to sell the bank. So in this example, if you have these multiple meetings, you get to sell your farm. And I think that probably would help with retention side of things is if you are very clear about the expectations of this role, about the environment that they're working in, then there's no surprises. You don't have someone that comes in and hates their first 90 days because it's not what they expected. If you take the extra time to spend with them up front, they're also going to get a much more clear idea of what the role is going to be, how the way your farm's going to operate, how you manage. That kind of popped in my head, Dave.
So, Lori, how many people, Tanner's popping my brain here because he's thinking like, let's keep him for 30 years. And I'm thinking, I just read something that says the average person that comes out of college probably changed jobs 4 or 5 times before they find their forever job, if you will. What are you seeing?
Yes. So I'll be careful with my college students here. So the earlier they are in their career, they do move a lot. I think it stems down from they're just still trying to figure out what they want and who they want to be. So for a farm, on the farm side or agribusiness side, that's something that is a little bit of a risk to them if they're going to be hiring right out of college or within a couple of years of college, especially if you're, let's say, a smaller operation. I would be somewhat hesitant of that just because of that. They haven't always kind of figured out where they want to fall. Now, if you're a larger agribusiness, that's fine because you can usually find another kind of place to plug them in, right? So there's a little bit of risk, but so I'll pause on that. But, if I had someone for a strong 5 to 8 years, that it's just a lot, the movements are a lot less. So if you had someone prior that moved every 5 years, you have a big flag. The challenge is now we see they're moving every 1 year or 2 years.
I was going to say, when I got hired at 14 at Hardee's, my dad said, now you can't quit. And I said, what do you mean I can't quit? He says, you can't quit for at least 5 years. And I did. I worked at Hardee's for 5+ years because Dad said I couldn't, because he said some employer is going to really look at the longevity. And so I worked there for quite a while, more than most people work fast food. I looked at that when I started to hire. Well, why'd they go from here to here to here to here? As long as it looked like it was always moving up or progressing, I didn't really necessarily care. But is there a way to get around that if we called it an internship?
Potentially. I mean, if you needed someone like for the season, could you, yes, do an internship. If they're coming out of college and they're looking for full time, it probably won't fly.
Right.
Gotcha.
To do it that way. It would have to be like over the summer for like a season, things like that. I have, besides interviewing and spending time, there's also nothing wrong with having them come for a day or a half a day in job shadow, like on a weekend or after hours. You technically, I won't get the, the legal side of things here. Technically, you can't have them working, right? You can't actually have them like repair something and then not pay. But, there's nothing that says they can't shadow for a day and spend some time with your team. And I think that's a great idea if it works out for both sides. Just, again, make sure that it, for the foreseeable future, we think it's a good fit. But the 30-year employee, yeah, you're right, David. That's just not going to happen, anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it comes down to the role and expectations. If you're just looking for a warm body, to put it in layman's terms, a warm body for the fall to run a piece of tillage equipment, then no, you're going to hire a lot differently than if you're looking for a herdsman that's going to take care of your livestock. So it all comes down to position by position. But earlier you talked about how the pool keeps getting smaller and smaller. We've had a couple of local farmers look outside of the United States to make this pool a little bit bigger. Do you have any experience with hiring people that are not from within the U.S.?
So, yes and no. So when it comes to like the H2A program, very familiar with it. We use it on our own farm, and many of our clients use H2A programs. We aren't an administrator of that program or recruit for that. So I still think that's a great resource for farms that can utilize H2A. We have worked with like TN visas, that's from like Mexico and Canada to the US occasionally. It can work. In that case, there has to be even more vetting than
Right.
your typical. And you have to understand from whatever country that you might be pulling from, where are their farming practices in comparison to the US? So are they more progressive than us? Are they 5 to 10 years behind in technology than us? So you just have to be careful of what country you're pulling from. Is there a visa that matches, because you can't just bring over anyone. So is there a visa that matches for that role, for that background? And then again, where's the farm lie in that process? But most of farmers are using H2A.
We have covered a lot today, Dave, and we bounced around a little bit, but we tried to take our listeners from creating that job to know what they need to fill to searching, advertising / finding the candidates, and then being able to ask some decent questions and what we can do then pay and benefits wise to help keep them. So Lori, before we wrap up and summarize, do you have anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with? Anything we didn't hit on that might be helpful to share?
I guess understanding the vast changes in the market is probably the biggest. I can't emphasize it enough, and it's very difficult to navigate. But I would say understand what this current market is, be aware of it, in your local market with what that looks like, and then just the kind of pre-planning when it comes to talent management. I mean, I'm excited that talent management is on the forefront, in ag. Kind of prior, it was more like a kind of a line on the P&L as an expense. We know, talent drives, the business drives profitability. And so really taking just as hard of a look as your team and who's on your team, what your talent looks like, just as much as your finances or just as much as your crop input. So if I had to do one tip, it's really taking a deeper strategic look at your talent.
One thing you just made me think of that we didn't cover, Tanner, is age demographic.
Yeah.
Is there a specific, as you're trying to find the right candidate for the right job, as I've looked and as I've hired right out of college and they seem to want to jump, and I've hired 55-year-olds that husband or someone else has benefits and they require less. Is there a specific like age demographic looking for a certain job, or should the employer? We can't ask that question, can we? We can't say how old are you? I didn't think we could. So we just have to judge that they look geriatric or they look like a 20-year-old. But I'm guessing that people probably put some of that into. Do they ask you that, Lori, when they're looking? Like, I'm really looking for somebody who's not a greenhorn.
They do, yeah, and that's easy to say. Like, someone with less experience or more experience. I happen to be a big fan of individuals with lots of experience, because if they're on the tail end of their career, they often, that might be their last job, and they do tend to really care about the equipment and manage the details. And someone we just interviewed, like, oh well, he's only got like 8 more years left. I'm like, well, that if you get 8 solid years, that's exciting in today's market,
right.
So I think that the view on that has changed, right? We like, oh, they're almost on their way out. I will take someone with a ton of knowledge for 8 straight years, in terms of the operation. So I would just, encourage farms to look at the whole package on that. I do understand. I mean, in terms of physicalness, they're really active or have to be, scouting a lot or things like that. You have to kind of match that with where they're at with their abilities. But in general, I think they should look at all the markets because of that.
So my in-laws have actually had some success lately with the semi-retired and retired demographics. Now, they've very quickly understood that means they aren't going to get 10-hour days out of these individuals. But if you pair 2 or 3 of them together to complete a task, say it's fall tillage, somebody starts at 5 in the morning, somebody picks it up at noon, and then someone comes and runs after supper, or whatever it looks like. It might take a little bit more intense management on the scheduling side, but it seems to work out well on, like you said, they care about the equipment. There's less maintenance because they always want to get out and stretch their legs. They always want to walk around it and make sure the bearings aren't going out. So that's different than that college kid that I'm just completely stereotyping that is energy drinks, going to put in 16 hours, didn't actually sleep before they showed up. So it's different sides of the spectrum. But Lori, we really appreciate you joining us. I'm going to do my best to summarize. So if you catch something that I didn't hit in the summary, please feel free to interject it, Dave, and then I'll have you challenge everybody before we close out. So we started off here with Lori Kohler. She's, of course, with AgHires. Lori, don't let me forget to have you drop your contact information after I wrap up, too. She stated that maybe when you're looking for these candidates, you prioritize the skills that are completely necessary. It might not necessarily be an ag background anymore. We may want some more diverse skill sets, and we can train the ag task, the position we're filling. It helps you then grow that pool, because our pool, Dave, is getting a lot smaller than it used to be. And don't forget about the employees that you already have. Just because you have a vacancy doesn't mean you need to go right back into filling that one spot that you had before. So maybe there might be somebody on your team that wants to be the herdsman or would rather go into running a truck, or whichever it looks like. The stay interview, as Lori educated us on, could be a really valuable tool on your farm. So not only the exit interview to find out why that candidate's leaving to begin with, but hitting with the employees that you currently have to see what makes them happy, what makes them tick, and maybe you can help them stay, as in the cliche for that interview type. You don't have to worry about being a small farm, because there are incentives outside of pay that we can provide. Think about those things that don't cost your farm a lot of money. Cell phone plan, work truck, quarter of beef, extra time off. Maybe it's a performance bonus based upon the farm, but there are more things that we can do than just pay to keep those employees around. Also, think about where you're going to advertise. Of course, use AgHires. We've learned right alongside Lori that they are very qualified to help you find a position or find a person to fill your position. But think about where they're coming from and where your ideal candidate is right now when you go about advertising. Be careful when you create that job description that you aren't too tight on the qualifications, Dave. You brought that up, a good point. And always be recruiting. Think about the ideal candidate that you'd like to work right alongside every single day, and you might find them someplace else rather than a job board. Offer job shadowing. offer 2 to 3 in-person meetings during the interview process to really get to know the candidate a lot better, to avoid any surprises on both sides. We're going to, I think, throw some interview questions in the show notes. We'll have Lori send some of those over that might be really good about gauging how that person is going to work with you on your farm. Trust your gut a little bit. We didn't hit on that very much, but you've worked on this farm for all your life. It's your business. You know what you need. You've done this day in and day out. Don't overthink it. And then ultimately, just really pay attention to what's going on around you. Pay attention to that job market to make sure that you do exactly what it's needed to compete and make sure that pool swims your direction.
Well, that's a pretty good summary right there, Lori. What do you think?
It was great.
All right. So all our guests, we ask a very similar question. We'll phrase this one to you, just a little bit of a twist. What do you see your top producing or top tier clients? So this could be the people recruiting or the recruits themselves. What do they all have in common? The top tier that we talked about. While she's thinking of that, Tanner, let me offer a challenge to our listeners. I'm going to give 2 challenges. So the first challenge is, I heard this at a conference a couple of years ago. A friend of mine said, the minute that I hired other people to help me is the minute my business started taking off. So I'm going to challenge our listeners to, if they weren't thinking of hiring somebody, maybe they should. I'm really bad at this. I want to do everything myself. I want to hire somebody, even though it's going to cost me, dirty dog, but I'm going to hire somebody to help me with it. I think it'll make our farm, our business grow. So that's first challenge. Second challenge is shoot for the moon. So if you are the college student that thinks you don't have the ability to apply for that job, having done that myself, even without the qualifications, still getting hired. I think people... there's validation to a degree, and then so that's for the young people. Now to the older folks, just as Lori said, I think there's a lot of validity and experience yet. Shoot for the moon. Yeah. Don't think you're over the hill yet. So shoot for the moon, both if you're young and if you're old. Don't think you're done yet, or that, that college kid has the degree in front of me, they're going to get it over me. I think I think the candidate who's hiring, or the employer who's hiring, long challenge here. Sorry. I think the candidate who's hiring will decipher what they want and what's best. So challenge, shoot for the moon. And
I'm going to add to your long challenge.
There you go.
On the shoot for the moon, also on the employer side. If you've picked a candidate that you think might be overqualified for what you want, let's see if they're interested. Let's find out what their passions are and go after them, because you might be able to create something that really brings them to your farm. So Lori, a little couple minutes there to think about it. What do the most successful people or top tier candidates all have in common?
Yeah, so I give that some thought. I really think they're always looking forward, right? It's so easy, especially on farms. I mean, it's still in my own blood. We just love to just do, right? Just get down there and execute. But we have to kind of always have our head picked up looking forward. So they're constantly educating themselves on what is, the best strategic plan? What are other industries doing? How can I continuously improve? So they've got the best have their heads up, and they're working kind of like not always head down in the business, but on the business. So maybe that is hiring someone to take off some of that day to day so that they can continue to look forward. So I would say that's probably the biggest one. And same tied to that is looking forward is looking at what is that culture, where we're heading. I think we're hearing more and more farms trying to figure out how can we do this and maintain hours a little bit for harvest and plants. We can't always do that, but just saying, hey, we're a farm. I don't know if that's going to compete for talent as we have more and more people not wanting to work 2,800 hours a year. So I don't know. I don't have a solution on that one, but I have farms that are talking about how to try to work to minimize that as best they can. And they've got their head up looking forward strategically.
I like that. I like that a lot. So how can listeners, if they do want to work with AgHires or want to ask some more questions outside of this episode, get a hold of you, Lori?
Sure. They could just email me at Lori, Lori, at aghires.com, or you can call the business line, 734-206-2617.
Awesome. Don't forget about AgHires. Also, don't forget about BW Fusion. They're focused on bringing innovative fertility, nutritional, and technological products to the ag marketplace. Corey, who's not here today, has been very pleased with the performance this year and cannot wait to harvest his products, his crops. that have had these BW Fusion products on them. So they're putting these best-in-class products along with their 365 soil and tissue program to provide you, the grower, more tools that are necessary to address the limiting factors in your soil in real time, Dave.
You bet. Well, thanks, Lori. Appreciate you visiting on the podcast. And Tanner, I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, listeners, submit your ideas. Farm4ProfitLLC@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, rate, review. And until next time, have a good one.
Remember, if you aren't farming for profit, you won't be farming for long.